Hey there, it's Josselyne Herman-Saccio, host of the Being Unmessablewith podcast. And today I am sitting down with Brandon Fong, and he is amazing and really unique and special and engaging. So you're going to see as soon as you start to listen, we are going to start differently right in the middle of his unmessablewith moment, from a cold water reset to finding the 4% that drives 64% of your results. Pretty fascinating. So we dive into curiosity, identity, and creating from vision instead of reaction. So come with us. I think this one is going to light something up for you for sure. Hey there. Welcome to Be Unmessable with the podcast. I'm your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and today my guest is Brandon Fong. He is a husband to his high school sweetheart, Leah. He's a father to his happy baby girl, Kaya, and he's the host of a top 1.5% globally ranked podcast called Beyond Curious. So curious is going to be the theme today. He's the founder of Curiosity Island. You sense a theme, yes? And his life's purpose is to create a more deeply connected world by catalyzing curiosity. So I am excited to have him on the show. Let's welcome him. Welcome, Brandon.
So good to be here and so good to see you as well.
I feel like the painting behind me and your shirt are like a theme. I feel, that's my father's painting of koi fish. And I feel like it's perfectly with your environment. It should be hanging in your background.
Yeah, I need that. I need my version of it. I'll have to commission your father.
That's right. He's got a whole website with lots of pieces of koi. But in any case, I was talking to Brandon right before the show, everybody, and we were talking about, well, usually I start with, tell us how you ended up doing this. But his story is so intertwined with his unmessable-with moment that we wanted to talk about. So I'm going to start the show a little bit differently, and I'm going to ask you, Brandon, like, what's an example of a time in your life when you were dealing with something so difficult? Maybe it was a circumstance or a person, but it was so difficult it could have sent you down for the count, messed with you unrecoverably, but you were able to transcend whatever it was and emerge. As you know, what I mean by unmessable with is stay true to your vision and not get, down for the count. So what's an example of that comes to mind?
And I love it, and I love the theory and everything around it, because like you said before we hit the record button, it's like those are the moments that make us. So for me, my unmessable with moment is definitely what created this magical world that I'm grateful to live in. So the moment that comes to mind for me is I had a relationship with someone that I won't use any names, but I went into business with them. This is somebody that I loved, that I trusted, that came to my wedding, that we spent lots of time with. She impacted my life in many ways, and I'm still to this day beyond grateful for her presence. She changed my life in so many ways. And some of the packages were beautiful in lessons, but some of them were kind of ugly in unmessable with delivery. So that was one of those moments where I went into the business with this person, and they will just say that they left very abruptly. And I had invested lots of my energy and momentum and direction and vision in this relationship, and it ended, and I just kind of had this moment I'll never forget. I actually went to Lake Michigan. It was like November, and I'm from Wisconsin, and I just wanted to go jump in the cold water to just feel something. I was just like, I literally like had so much in here, and I remember sitting in that water and being like, where do I go from here? And it was kind of just like I had to kind of answer all the toughest questions to answer, which is, what do I want? Which is a very difficult question for most people to answer. What are my superpowers? What are my core values? What's the impact I want to create? Who do I want to serve? And so that moment was kind of a catalyzing moment for me to go back to the drawing board and be comfortable with that turbidity, be comfortable with that space that was opened up from that, and just be okay with realizing that building from a solid foundation of alignment of who you are is going to create so much stronger results down the line than if I had just been the entrepreneurial ninja squirrel that so many of us hang out with, where it's like you just go and you jump to the next thing and put band-aids on top of something that you haven't really done. I can unpack more of that, but it was that moment that caused me to answer all those questions and then build from those foundational building blocks that have kind of set the foundation for me to build what I've created today.
Well, I love what you're saying about the cold water. I mean, not everybody can go jump in a lake, so to speak, but what I can hear in that is, inside of my methodology about hacking those messable with moments, is to do something physical that resets your brain and takes you out of that amygdala hijack of, fight, flight, or flee or freeze, has you actually look at, okay, now what am I creating? And it sounds like that's what you actually did physically with like a cold plunge, and having you kind of get present and look at, what am I creating? Like, what do I want? Who am I? Because you can't align your actions to who you are if you're stuck in a reaction, because that's not who you are.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're right. I love how you pull out like the physical element to it too, right? Because some of these things you can't solve with your brain. You can't just sit and kind of logic your way through it. It requires full body integration. So sometimes whatever things you can throw at yourself that kind of shakes up your normal way of thinking or your patterns, I've always found helpful. Whether sometimes actually in the summer I'll do like training for like 100-mile bikes, and my best ideas come from when I'm on the bike and I'm listening to content or I'm recording ideas. And so I think it's really easy to get caught up in the fact that you need to be a human doing, and do some things and keep moving. But sometimes it's in those moments of doing something completely different out of context that really stimulates your environment and helps you to create something new.
Yeah, and I find, for me, when I do that, when I interrupt the pattern, that's how I would call it. It's like you're interrupting the pattern of thinking, because when we're trying to come up with a solution or a fix or a next step inside of the same thinking, what you're going to come up with is limited by the thinking. So it's almost
100%.
like, I think it was Einstein who said, the problems of our world can't be solved at the same level as they were created at. I think that's an apropos thing to, what you demonstrated with that jump.
100%. Yeah. Consciousness, being able to shift and understand different levels of thinking, it's everything.
Yeah, no, for sure. And most people don't take the time to design that into, because it doesn't happen by accident. I think that's, especially when you're getting messed with by something that happens, or somebody that does something that you didn't expect or didn't want. It's so difficult to not catch yourself, or to catch yourself going down that road of reacting or being disappointed or frustrated or all of that. So I love that you did that, and that you built a foundation from there. When you work with people, well, first of all, tell us about Curiosity Island and Beyond Curious, because as I was saying in the introduction, curiosity is the theme here. So, and I'm curious about how you've designed this world of curiosity as a connector for people.
Yeah, thank you. It was funny. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. It's so hard to like describe what I do when I meet someone in the street. It's like I have an imaginary island with incredibly successful people that pay me money for living in an imaginary world that I've built, and they love it. So like that's like one so I have one core concept that's kind of at the heart of my world, and then different manifestations of that. So like at the highest level, and you and I actually talked about this on our podcast together,
Yeah.
which was fun because you kind of challenged me on the concept of vision. So I have some intricacies that maybe I didn't have before that. But I've said for the longest time, a North Star for me has been connection. I believe that some of our deepest problems that are created in the world is from some sort of disconnection from self, from others, from relationships. And so I just believe that learning how to create deeper connection in the world is the greatest catalyst to help unlock more problems. And so that intention has kind of created this methodology that I now call Find Your Four, which is, like I said, it's at the core, and then everything else is a manifestation of it. So I can describe it at a really high level, and then Josselyne, maybe we can play back and forth and kind of do some real-time stuff with it,
Yes,
because it'll
use
help
me as
explain
a
all of
guinea
it.
pig. I love it. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, then why don't we do this then? So the Find Your Four, I'll just describe at a really high level. It comes from the Pareto principle. So I always like to ask when I'm doing this in person with someone what level someone's level of familiarity is with 80-20 or Pareto principle. So I'll just ask you, Josselyne, and then you listening can kind of like put the number in your head. So on a scale of 1, never heard of it before, to 10, I'm obsessed with it and I think about it all the time, where do you land on the Pareto principle 80-20 scale?
-4. So go for it.
-4. All right, great. Love it. Okay. So the Pareto principle comes from this guy named Vilfredo Pareto. He was an economist way long time ago, and he first discovered that there was like a disproportionate result. He was looking at his crops and he found out there were 20% of his seeds that created like 80% of the yield. And so it was like this weird pattern that he observed, and then it kind of turned into this kind of heuristic, this rule of thumb that he started observing all over in nature. So you can look at the wealth distribution. 80% of the wealth is owned by 20% of the population. 80% of the traffic is only on 20% of the roads. So in business, it's been this lens that has been used a lot to make decisions. Like, how do I find the products that are yielding the greatest results or the customers that are causing the greatest headaches? And so it's kind of been this blanket thing of like, how do I find that 20% and hone in on that? And I think it's incredible. But what really, really blew my mind is when I interviewed this guy named Perry Marshall on my show, and he turned me on to the concept that 80-20 is fractal. So you can apply 80-20 to itself. And that's where it gets pretty wild, because if you do an 80-20 on that 20%, that's where you, yeah, that's where you find out that there's 4% of your actions that create 64% of your results. I know this is where it gets a little bit weird, math nerdy, but just hang with me here. That's what really blew my mind. I was like, what could possibly be 4% of what I do that creates the majority of the results in my life? And I just got super excited about what could that be? How do I find it? How do I live more in line with it? How do I collaborate with people based on it? So that was interesting. And then there's one more layer underneath that. This is the last layer I talk about, is we do an 80-20
layer.
Yes.
I'm getting
the last out. Yeah, exactly. We'll keep it and say that you can do one more layer, and it's under 1% of your action still creates over 50% of the results in your life. Wow. And when I found that out, I was like, that's even more mind blowing, obviously, than 4. But this is where our work overlaps, Josselyne, because I believe that 1% is basically, those are your core beliefs, those are your identity. That's like at the heart of your belief system. So when you take your belief system and you apply that with your most potent actions and qualities, the 4%, that's what manifests the majority of the results there. And so it's this process of how do you view things from the perspective of what are the different ways that I can increase awareness. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by Carl Jung: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you will call it fate. And for the longest time, I always thought that from the negative perspective. Like, what are the negative limiting beliefs? I know there's a huge story from your life, Josselyne, of finding that limiting belief of not knowing that you could be an artist, and like unlocking that. Boom, Billboard top 40 artist, right? So it's like, I always viewed it from that perspective. But the same quote applies the opposite direction and saying, what are those unconscious things that you're doing that are creating the majority of the results in your life? And how do you increase awareness of that? Because the things that we create that create the majority of our results in our life, we're not even aware of how we do it. It's just so natural to the way that we operate that it's kind of hard to untangle. So anyways, I can go into the example of doing it with you, Josselyne, but that's the high level of just the I call them the layers of consciousness. 20% is like the area where your 4% exists. It's like the top Russian nesting doll. Inside of that is that 4%, the potent actions and qualities. And then underneath that are your core values and identity and your consciousness. And when you are aware of the core belief system identity that lays at the core, and then you're intentional about the actions and qualities that you take, and you do it inside of a context that is natural for you, that you're not fighting upstream with, that's where the magic happens. So I'll just stop there, because that was a bunch of math and percentages. And
let's do it. Let's do it. I'm anxious now.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to do a little bit of a technical switch here, because I currently have my headphones on as my speaker. So I'm going to switch it so that I can, because what I'm going to do in the back end here is I'm going to use Chat GPT, and I'm going to have you share a story. And then I've trained the GPT to be able to look at the story from the lens of the 20, the 4, and the 0.8. And so I'll just say one other thing. One of my core values I call conscious storytelling, because I believe that our stories that we tell are the medium of our reality, both the internal and the external. And so that's what's so beautiful about this process, because you can do something as simple as sharing a story that's meaningful for you, and then leverage that as an opportunity to uncover. So the easiest way to do this is to simply ask a question. So Josselyne, I appreciate you being a guinea pig here, because this is so much fun for me. So my question to you, Josselyne, is I would love for you to share a story that fits these 2 criteria. One is that you created a meaningful result at the end of the story. So something happened that was incredibly meaningful and fulfilling and transformational. And when you crossed that finish line, you felt so alive. It just felt amazing. So that's criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is that in the process of manifesting that journey, of creating that result, that entire journey was like, you felt like you were on fire, you were alive. So I'm sure, Josselyne, you've lived many lives. You have done so many different things. You probably have 90 different stories that fit that criteria. But is there something in particular that stands out that fits that criteria for you?
Well, initially when you started asking me, I was thinking about my father-in-law, but the whole process, I wasn't feeling alive and on fire. It was more like it was a real struggle and then a breakthrough. So that probably is not a good story for
Yeah,
this, right?
I would agree. Let's go
Okay.
with let's go with a different story that kind of fits both those criteria. Even though you could find lots of learnings from that, and the
Oh yeah.
GPT would work, but let's make it a little bit easier on the GPT.
Well, probably the record deal thing would
Great,
be the story, so I could definitely tell that story.
please do.
Okay. Well, to give the backstory of it, when I was little, I loved singing, and it was like my passion. I would sing to anybody or anything that would stand still, including stuffed animals and dogs and all that kind of stuff. And then when I was 5 years old, I was sitting in a car with my dad, and he had been a painter, and he had stopped painting. So I said to him, "How come you stopped painting?" And he just offhandedly said, "Well, you can't do your art as your career." And in that moment, I decided that was the truth. Now, it wasn't that he said it. It was more that I said it to myself, like, this is now the truth. So don't pursue singing. I mean, I was 5, but it was like pretty much that dream was now no longer real. It was like, okay, that's not going to happen. So I'll do something else. I'll be a business person or whatever. So flash forward, I'm in a transformative workshop in my very early 20s, and somebody is sharing something, and I'm listening. And all of a sudden, I recall this moment in the car with my dad. And I heard it differently. I heard it like not like the truth, but what if that isn't true? What if you could do your art as your career? What if this is just a decision I made in the infinite wisdom of 5 and then had it run my life? Like, what you haven't distinguished kind of runs your life, what's in the background. And it was in the background as a belief. I thought it was the truth. So now it was like just a belief. So I felt lighter in that moment. And I started taking actions that a singer would take. And I scheduled to make a demo, and I scheduled a show, and I started introducing myself to people as a singer. And then I had this audition for a group called Boy Crazy, and they were looking for a 5th member. And I was like, oh my God, this is like my dream come true. It was like a Motown kind of put together group. I was like, if I could have designed a vehicle, this would have been it. And then I got a call the next day that I didn't get it, that they were going to go with like a 14-year-old. They wanted younger. I mean, at 20, I was too old. It was ridiculous, right? But they wanted to go with a 14-year-old. So in that moment, I could have just been like, ugh, forget it. Obviously, it's not possible. But instead, I stayed in my vision of, this being a singer, this goal and this dream. And I started taking actions. I started making a list of everybody that I knew that is in the music business and who could I call. And, I just kept creating. And it really was like that experience of being on fire. Even the week that I didn't know if I got it, I was in action. I was calling people, light a candle, pray. Did it? My grandmother was having like prayer circles with her friends, lighting. And it was kind of like it didn't even matter what happened. It was so enlivening, the whole process, right? And even when I would get a thought like, oh, what if I don't get it? I'd be like, well, I could think about that, or I could think about what can I take an action right now on, to who can I call to get lighting candles, and this whole thing. So then I went out to lunch with a friend to plan a fundraiser the next day after I found out that I didn't get it. And I came back, this before cell phones. I came back from lunch. It was like a 3-hour lunch. And we were planning an AIDS fundraiser. And I get like 6 messages from my agent, who happens to be one of my dearest friends now. And she's no longer an agent. Her name is Terry Cole. She's a thought leader and has like Boundary Boss is her book and all this. She's amazing. And she said, they changed their mind. They want you. And in that moment, I could cry even thinking about it. It was like, oh my God, my dream is fulfilled. And that was just the beginning. And then we went #1 and toured the world and all of that stuff. But it was like so fulfilling to have what I created realized. So that's the
Beautiful.
story.
Thank you. Oh man, I just got chills listening to that. It always lights me up hearing someone share a story that's so meaningful. And there's so much wisdom that anyone listening can pull from even just listening to you hear that story. So thank you for sharing, Josselyne. And it doesn't get old because I already heard that story when you shared it on the
I know,
podcast. So
right?
it's just so good. So and I
And
could
that's where the birth of doing this for other people, coaching people to be able to live their dreams, that's where it all came from. Is like, if I can do this, anyone can do this.
love it. So I'm going to talk out loud. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to so I took that transcript and I'm going to feed it into the Find Your 4 GPT. So I'm just going to tell the GPT, find Josselyne's 4%, 20% 4%, and 0.8%. And then I'm just going to hit enter on this. And obviously you're just listening to the audio, and you may not, if you're watching the video, you're not seeing me do that on the screen. But so like I said before, the GPT is going to look at that story from the lens of what's the 20, what's the 4, and what's the 0.8. And it's going to be relatively myopic in what it pulls out because we only gave it one story, right? So like the more dimensions that we can share, even if you did tell that other story that you were thinking about with your dad that wasn't fitting those criteria. But I have a episode I published on the podcast 221. I invented this thing called the Beyond Curious Time Machine, or the 4% Time Machine. And you tell it stories from your past, your present, and your future. You can feed it personality tests, and it's going to keep pulling out all these different things. So I'll share my screen because I know I have the ability to do that, and I'll share with you what it pulled out from this one story, and give me a audio that you can hear. You can see my screen, Josselyne. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. It's very small, but I can see it. So
okay,
for those
cool.
of you watching, if you can't read it, Brandon will narrate.
Yeah, I'll be the narrator here. So what it pulled out is your 20% area of brilliance is creative manifestation. So you have a profound ability to turn visions into reality, particularly in the realm of creative expression. Your brilliance lies in your capacity to fully step into the reality you desire, aligning your beliefs, actions, and identity with your goals. This extends beyond just singing. It's about embodying a vision so completely that the world responds in kind. So I'm doing this live without a net. Obviously, like that could be completely off, or it could be spot on. But I like to ask Josselyne, on a scale of 1 being you're talking about a different human, the GPT is on some kind of drug, or 10 being like that's in the inside of my brain. Where do we land right now?
I'd say it's close to a 10. I mean, obviously, it only had that one story, so it doesn't, like, I could tell a story about how I raised $1 million in 3 days, and
Yep.
like, so it would be more dimensional. But
Yep.
I'd say it's pretty close to a 10. In fact, I think I could use that as my bio on LinkedIn.
There you go. I love that. And what I like, we'll go through the rest of it, but I'll just say for you listening, just the impact of this is that I think the funny thing about 80/20 math is that you can solve 80% of the problem through location. I'm putting location in air quotes for you listening right now, because it's like if you simply are operating in a place that is outside of your 20% capability, you can solve so much by simply moving. Like imagine, Josselyne, if you didn't go on a career where you weren't coaching people, or if you weren't, it's like so much of that would have been squandered. Just that simple awareness of what's that 20%, how do I be more intentional about where do I move? It's incredibly healing. I think that's what's really cool about this is that I love this quote, awareness is medicine. Sometimes all you got to do is integrate it, and you're going to naturally start finding those alignments. So I love that. I'm grateful that we're at least in the right track here. So I'll go back to sharing the 4%, what it pulled out. So it said your 4% potent actions and qualities is embodied creation, rewriting limiting beliefs as one of your 4% areas. You caught a belief you can't do art as a career that has been unconsciously shaping your life and consciously rewrote it, which unlocked everything else. The second one said identity before reality. You didn't just wait for proof to call yourself a singer. You became a singer in your actions, introductions, and mindset before the external world confirmed it. And then it also said inspired relentless action. Even after rejection, you stayed in motion, actively seeking opportunities rather than passively waiting for validation. And then the last one it pulled was energetic alignment. The way you describe feeling on fire and how the process itself was fulfilling suggests that your ability to generate and sustain high energy momentum is key to your success. So again, I'll stop the screen one more time here. Where does that land? What are your any thoughts on that one, Josselyne?
It's got to be a 9, between 9 and 10, for sure. It's definitely, and it's what I do with people.
Yep.
That is the magic sauce in my coaching with people, is having them be able to reproduce that.
Yeah. And it's so funny because for the way I always describe the 4% for you listening too, it's like, you can't read the label from inside the jar. And Josselyne, you're obviously a very self-aware person. You've done lots of this work yourself. You've built a life unapologetically in alignment with lots of these different things. But there are so many nuances that I've picked up in sharing so many different angles to it that has really, again, because I have words for it or language for it, I think that's one of those things that, like, until you have language for something or are able to point at something, that's kind of like the layer that little nuance can make the hugest of a difference. So, and it's fun too, because I'm pretty sure, Josselyne, you shared a story that was from your 20s, and when you had that early experience, and I can, because I know you and your story, I saw those 4% show up in all the different other areas. So it's beautiful because if you find that 4%, I think what's beautiful about this concept and the layers of consciousness is that it solves for many of the problems that are, remember back to my unmessable with story, I had to answer the questions, what do I want? What are my core values? All of those are actually embedded in this concept. And I find that it's more accessible to go on the journey of finding your 4% than asking Josselyne, what do you want? Right. Because if you know your 4% actions and your 20%, your 0.8, your purpose simply becomes live in alignment with that. Right. Like just continue to pursue that. So yeah, I love it.
Very cool.
Cool.
And
Well,
how do
then,
you find the 0.8?
yeah, we'll go to the 0.8 and then we'll continue exploring, but we'll go to the last section that it pulled up here, which now I have all my screens all over the place. So it said empowering beliefs and core identity. I am the architect of my reality, it said as the summary. So description, at your core, you hold the belief that your reality is created by you. It's not about waiting for permission or external validation. It's about claiming it, stepping into it, and making it real. Core belief in creation, you don't just dream, you create, you take ownership of your vision and live into it before it fully manifests. Identity as a manifester, you are a creator, not just of music, but of possibilities. You take bold, aligned action that turns intangible dreams into tangible realities, and then trust in the process, even when facing uncertainty or setbacks. Look at that. You remain committed to the vision, reinforcing the belief that things will work out when you stay aligned and take action. So there's the final layer of that 4% there. So again, when you take those core beliefs and then you apply the actions on top of it, my guess is that Josselyne, if you had to do a career switch in tomorrow, you take that core, you take that 4% and you could port it into other areas and you're going to create magic. So yeah, I love it.
So fun. It's so funny that it used the word architect because I just rebranded like on my bios, vision architect is what
Nice.
instead of just master coach, it's master coach, thought partner, vision architect. So it's there you go.
Yeah.
I love it. You gotta send me all that.
Yeah, I will send it all to you. And again, this is so funny because this is probably the longest way around of answering. Brandon, tell us about Curiosity Island in your world, right? So that's the core of this world is find your four. So Curiosity Island is a community where people get to connect and collaborate based on their 4%. How do I turn everybody into a mirror, not a mentor, and helping you see that part of yourself that you can't see so you can increase awareness of your 4%? And the funny thing about your 4% is that it gives you energy when you give it away. So I've designed a process where people get to solve each other's problems leveraging their 4%.
Oh, so great.
Most communities I found, they match people based on the 20%, which serves, it does great job. It's like if you know what someone does categorically and you partner with someone. But I find that when you strip people down to their 4% and their 0.8%, not only to connect more, but it creates more transformation. Our mutual friend, Jen Hill, that actually introduced us, she's what I label as a conscious super connector. And she's one of the most best super connectors that I know because she knows who someone is at their 0.8%. She sees your core value. She sees your core identity. You do this as well, Josselyne, and you're able to hold someone to that standard and create connections and opportunities based on that core instead of what someone might say at the surface levels, I'm looking for this, but they're not even fully aware of the opportunities that would be present if they had that. So yeah, it's that
Jen Hill has a superpower, that is for sure, of being a super connector. There's no question. She was in my apartment in France this morning. She was staying there last night. Exactly. But tell me, when you work with people, what gets in the way of accessing their, their 4, their 0.8, what gets in the way of them being able to fully maximize this methodology?
Yeah, so it's ridiculously simple, and it's belief in it. Because some people don't really like, it's one of those things where it's like you can have a conscious understanding of something or you can kind of intellectualize it, and then there's like full embodiment and stepping into it. And so I think that's the thing that I've just observed in taking people through this process and collaborating it. It's kind of become language on the island is just like, oh, it's just what I do, in air quotes, right? Because it's like I can roll out of bed and do this, and it's so easy for me. So like I don't really understand how it's valuable to other people but other people look at it and you're like, you're an alien. That's insane. How did you do that? That was the coolest thing I've ever experienced. So it's interesting because I'd say that's at its core is very simple. It's belief in it, because until you honor and respect your 4% and you're focusing on increasing your awareness of it and elevating the impact of it and communicating it, it's like, it diminishes his power if you don't believe in it. So it's kind of a low level thing, but I've just found time and time again, people have trust issues with it.
Yeah. Well, people have trust issues with lots of things,
Yeah,
but
right.
yes. Okay. And if somebody wanted to do, find their four, how could they do it if they're not a member of, Curiosity Island? And
Happy to give the GPT away along with other tools. So first, yeah. So I created a link that people can use to go grab it. But you can also go check out episode 221 of my podcast. I think Josselyne, it's funny, you're episode 222. So if you want the full detail on Josselyne, they're right next to each other. So 221 is my Find Your Four
I'll put in a link
masterclass.
to your podcast, and I'll put
Nice.
in a link to the resources page.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So 221 or 222, those are great if you just want to go check out the episodes. But if you go to bfo.ng/unmessablewith, it's a short link. People have issues with this one, so I would describe it. I bought a domain from Nigeria. Many people don't say this because I wanted the short link bfong for Brandon Fong. So anyways, that's my short link, bfo.ng/unmessablewith. It's a short link generator. And that'll take you to a whole bunch of, if you want the GPT and if you want more information on the Find Your Four, you can go there. But if you don't want to go check that out, then go check out the podcast episodes, and you can go do that right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put the link to the podcast for sure in the show notes. And is there anything that people could do short of obviously putting a story into the GPT? What would be something somebody could, if they're driving in their car right now and they can't go into it? What could they do that would set them on the road to discovering their four?
Well, so it's interesting because I've learned time and time again that questions are way more powerful than answers. So sometimes a question you can ask yourself, you don't even need an answer on the other end of it. I think that's kind of the nuance that I've started to experience is you can ask yourself a question and just let it sit there and it's going to marinate and you're going to get insight. So I think if you very simply ask yourself the question, what might my 4% be? What might my core values be or positive intention? And so, but I think if you wanted something more actionable than just asking yourself a question, I would encourage yourself to answer that question yourself with the criteria that I had posed to you, Josselyne. So what's a story where you created a result, where you had a meaningful accomplishment and the process that you fulfilled it was meaningful as well? But any story of your life is grounds for uncovering your 4%. I would examine your childhood. Like what are the toys that you played with? And not only what are the toys you play with, but how did you play with the toys? I think it's important because one person can say they play with Legos and another person can say they play with Legos, but the way that you played with the Legos says a lot about how you see the world. Was it about the characters? Was it about building a world for them? Was it about creative expression and building a different thing? So if you just ask yourself, what might my 4% be? What are my core values? What are my potent actions? And then you also kind of looked back through your life of the different times when you felt alive or you were doing something that was meaningful, whether it's a hobby or a sport. Like all of those things have the breakdown of the different actions that you took, the way that you approach things. And I guarantee that if you look at the correlation between your childhood hobby and some result that you've created as an adult, there are elements that are similar. And so it's just kind of drawing the parallels between those things. And then once you're able to kind of isolate it, then it's just a matter of being more intentional about it or problem solving with it or expanding it. And the last thing I'll just say on this topic is I think so many people are thinking about AI and worry. I talked to someone the other day, a buddy of mine that's grown several multi-million-dollar companies. And he's like, I think AI is going to replace me. There's a YC company right now. Their goal is to be the first $1 billion one-person company. And lots of people are afraid of, and not the humans that are listening to this, right? Because we're unmessable with it. It doesn't matter what AI is throwing at us. But that said, I believe that AI can become an expansion of your consciousness, not a detraction of your consciousness. So when you're aware of your 4% and you leverage AI as a tool to expand that, it creates a completely different scenario than if you're just it's going to replace the other elements of it. So that was a lot there, but I think there's lots of homework of asking those questions to help you uncover awareness of it.
Well, then on the heels of that, what was your childhood hobby?
Oh man, there's so many. So here's the biggest pattern for me is magic. I love creating magic, right? And it's been it's my world, right? I live in a world of infinite possibility. People live in brilliance bungalows, which is where people's imaginary houses on my island. We have passports. So it's lots of my 20%, as I define it, is world building. The biggest passions or experiences from my childhood were getting immersed inside of a world or creating a story around a world or getting immersed into Harry Potter or learning magic tricks. And so the more I've leaned into being a magician, like creating magical worlds for people to exist in, the better. And so, yeah, those are, I could probably come up with a more specific answer than that, but lots of those things were related to that.
Yeah, and if you had to capsulize your 4 and point 8, what would you? I mean, obviously you've probably analyzed this to ad infinitum, but
Yeah.
whatever
Well,
that means. I don't know what ad infinitum means, but yeah,
yeah,
we just
no,
say things like that.
100%. No, so it's funny because you're never done, and that's what I love about this process. Is like I have an awareness today, but like I'm still uncovering teeny little tweaks and nuances. So the way I describe my 4%, I call it C5. It falls inside of a nice little all C's. So it's curiosity, connection, creativity, communication, and catalyze. So I realize that those words don't mean a lot. I could describe more nuances of how it works, but like I realize that in different contexts, they shift on how I do it. So the way I might use curiosity in my podcast versus the way I might use curiosity when I'm designing an experience for Curiosity Island, there are two little different ways of approaching it. But like the core functionality of how my 4% interacts with each other is the same. And then my 0.8%, those are my core values. So childlike curiosity, conscious storytelling, be an expansion catalyst. I could expand on all of those, but like those are some of the core. And I think that it's important to have language and a way of describing it, because it just has helped me to bring more awareness around it.
Well, I think you need to add a 6th C of context.
Context. Love
Which
it.
is decisive. Yeah, really. I like all your I love alliterations. All my kids are SS and my cats are SS and so it's all
Context is
about
huge.
alliteration.
I appreciate you so much for reflecting that too. And like this is even a perfect example. So my vision is eventually, and it's going to unfold into potentially like so many personality tests that you take are so static, like it's a snapshot in time. And my dream is that your 4% evolves. So what if there was a software that evolved with you that allowed you to kind of version yourself like software, where you're able to kind of see it. So even that simple reflection from Josselyne, and that's another tip I would give to people, is whenever someone gives you a compliment, that they just shared something so beautiful for you, like treat that as a gift. And so I so appreciate you adding that context, Josselyne, because it's like, yeah, I should think about that and I should integrate that. And so the next time someone pays you a compliment, pay attention to it, because they're reading the label from outside your jar, they're giving you data. And that's another thing that you could look at, is when someone says that to you, is like, how might that be an element of my 4% or my
And
0.8%?
compliment starts with C too. Oh my
Yeah.
God. We're gonna have
900 C's, all the C's.
Yeah. It's 1,000 units of C, so to
Yeah.
speak, a day. Well, it's just a pleasure to speak to you always, and we should do it again whether it's at your place or mine, so to speak. But is there any last words that you want to give our listeners as they're tuning out?
I mean, I'm biased on the whole curiosity thing, and but I honestly, leaning into expanding your curiosity, like there's been a huge shift that has showed up in my life when I rebranded to Beyond Curious, because I had to step into it at a whole new level, even more than I was before. But just as being a lab rat in the curiosity world, it is just when you're able to hold your beliefs in pencil, not pen, and you're willing to explore the different elements of the world. And I have a 16-month-old daughter at home right now, and she's my curiosity mentor, right? Like she licked a door handle the other day, and I'm like, maybe she knows something that I don't. Let me try it.
Yeah, really.
It's
Kaya,
like,
Kaya the infinitely brilliant.
yeah, exactly. So I think like if just having that perspective of whenever you get triggered, whenever you get excited, is just an opportunity to look in and say what might be here, right? Like what could be here for me right now. And the more that you unapologetically pursue that, and you're not attached, like I think that's a big element of curiosity, is like not like over forcing things and just being open to exploring. It's just a beautiful lens to view the world through. So that would be my encouragement.
It's beautiful, and I'd like to just to add a dimension to what you're saying, and it may be behind what you said, is to be curious about people, not just beliefs, but like we so turn people into two-dimensional representations of them, like, oh well,
Yeah.
I know how my father is, or I know how my business partner is, or and the minute you know something, you stop being curious. So if people could bring being curious to their relationships, it keeps things alive rather than deadening, knowing something deadens it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like see, like you just reflected me. There's an opportunity for me even more because it's like you get you. I've been with my wife for over 12 years now, and it's like sometimes you start finishing each other's sentences because you quote unquote know them so well, and I have a bad habit of finishing her sentence. But it's like, wait, what if I was just more curious there? Like, what if there's something that I can understand? So yeah, it's just there's always more opportunities to do that, and I appreciate that shift of focusing on others as well. It's a gold mine for sure.
Yeah, especially I've been married 30 years, so it
It's
comes in
under
handy.
five. What is it? Under 5 fights? What's your statistic? Like the
It's
like
five. I say five. He says four, but I'm not going to argue because that would be yet another fight. He
you
says
up to
four, and
six and five.
I was pregnant for the first three, so
Okay, all right.
the hormones messed with me for sure.
That's fair. That's fair. You definitely get some
Yeah.
passes for that.
Yeah, exactly. The hall pass in a different way. Well,
Yeah.
it's just a joy to be with you, Brandon. I'll put all the links in the show notes so people can find your episode 221. People can, find the chat GPT, the GPT that you trained, and, get in this whole game of being beyond curious, not just curious, but beyond curious. And follow Brandon's podcast, which the link is going to be in the chat as well, so that you can get more juicy, juicy interviews. He interviews so many amazing people. It was one of my favorite interviews that I was ever in was yours because you are so curious. And it felt like you had done more research than you could have written my biography. After that, I was like, wow, like it's a real meaningful experience to have somebody be that interested in you and what you're up to. So thank you for providing that for people with your show.
Thank you, Josselyne. It means the world to me to have the opportunity to spend time with you and unpack your magic as well. So thank you, and it was a great episode. So I would highly encourage anyone to check it out.
Well, if they're listening to 221, just keep on listening to
There you go.
222. All right. And for those of you listening, if you got value out of today's episode, please share it with someone in your life that you think could use a little curiosity in their life, and rate and review it. Do all the things that help the algorithm, so that we can get to more and more people and give them tools and tips to be unmessable with in their life. We'll see you on the next episode. All right, as Brandon would say, stay curious, especially with those people that you think you know, including yourself. Now, drop a note below and let me know what your hack or pattern interrupt is going to be. And you can download my free instant reset tool, which will enable you to hack the world of reaction and shift over to the world of creation. If you want to keep the momentum going, watch our next video now.